So on to question 5 on the May 2018 AS paper 1 Edexcel. So logs question here. This seems to be a new type of question in that they seem to like to write out some algebra. It doesn't have to be logs, but they like to write some algebra out, and then you're expected to then find the errors in that working out. I'm not overly keen on these questions, if I'm honest, and I think a good way round them sometimes is to really just do the question yourself. So I think if you're staring at the working out and it all kind of looks okay, the best thing to do is actually do the question yourself, and then hopefully you would do some correct steps and notice where they've gone wrong. If you are trying to just spot them though, just really take it one step at a time. So when you look at this line to this line, you look at it and think, yeah, does that look okay? And I think the problem is that a lot of people would look at that and say, oh yeah, it looks okay, and then they try and move on to the next line really quickly. One of the golden rules really of combining logarithms together is that if there's a number at the front of one of the logs, like we have here, this 2 needs to be dealt with first. Really, this first step, let's actually write this first step out. The first step should have been that you take that 2 up as a power of the x, okay, and then we've got subtract log. Well, I can leave that bit alone. I mean, really, this is one of the errors, that I haven't dealt with this 2 correctly. And you just need to put that into words. You just need to say that the 2 at the front of the first logarithm needs to be taken up as a power using the power law. Okay, so that's one error. Okay, if we look at the rest of it, the second line, they've just simplified the bracket. They've said that x over root x is root x, which is correct. Couple of ways to think of that. You can just think that root x times root x is x, or you can think of it as indices, that it's x to the power of 1 divided by x to the power of half. You subtract the indices and you get x to the power of half. So this looks okay. The next step, they've now taken this 2 up as a power to change the root x. They've squared the root x and got x. So that's how they get to this line. So in theory there's nothing wrong with that, although we know we should have done that on the first line. Okay. The next step though, I mean, a very important thing is that you would need to know how to rewrite these logarithms in what we call exponential form. And let me just go through the process. I would definitely write this number down first. This is your base. I would write that as a big number. I know it sounds a little bit silly me saying I'll write it big, but it will help you avoid mistakes here. And then go round to this number, okay, and this number is going to be your power, so you write that quite small, okay, and then you carry on kind of round, almost like anti-clockwise around a circle. You then go to the x, okay, so this would be the correct way of writing that. Okay, and as you can see, what they've done is they've written 3 squared. They've got the 3 and the 2 round the wrong way. It's a really good question to have a look at and see whether you have the ability to kind of look at and spot the mistakes, or whether you need to write it out yourself. Okay, you might need to write this out yourself to see where the mistake is, and that's absolutely fine, and I would encourage you to do it. Okay, so that's part A. Okay, and then of course part B is now asking us to write out the correct solution, so we may as well have just done that in the first place. I would almost do part B first, okay, and then compare it with their answer, and you'll spot the mistake. So we'll basically go back over to here, because I've started this. Okay, so this is equal to 3. Okay, and then we subtract the logarithms. Okay, so log to the base 2, we're going to get x squared at the top, root x on the bottom, equal to 3. Okay, let's simplify the bracket first. We don't have to do that first, but we may as well. And again, I kind of explained how to do this just a second ago. Just treat it as indices. It's x squared, so it's a power of 2, and then we're dividing by x to the half, so we subtract those logarithms. Okay, so you're going to get x to the power of 3 over 2. Okay, and then the same as this bit over here, this is, we start with the 2, we go round to here, this is the power, and then you just copy what is inside the bracket. Okay, and of course 2 to the power of 3 is 8. Now I do see people struggle sometimes when they've got x to a power equals a number. We're used to doing x squared equals a number, we know to square root, and x cubed equals a number when we cube root, but people aren't quite so sure what to do when they've got a funny power like 3 over 2. There's a few different ways of doing it, but by far and away the simplest way to do this is you're aiming to create an x to the power of 1. And if you do this, you create a power that is basically just the reciprocal of the one that you've got. Okay, because when you times those together, which is the correct rule, you'll get x to the power of 1. Now, what that means is if I've done a power of 2/3 on the right hand side of the equation, then I need to do it on the right. Okay, so x is equal to 8 to the 2/3. You can put that in your calculator, but the way to do that without a calculator is you do the cubed root of 8 and then square it. Okay, so our final answer is x equals 4.